So before I even begin, I must say the saddest factor about these two artists featured today is that they both, as far as I know, have no existing footage. Unlike most of the performers we hear in the Fallout games, Roy Brown and Wynonie Harris are criminally underrated. But all grievances aside, we as Vault Dwellers know this blues-playing pair probably more than anyone in this generation, thanks to Fallout 3's Galaxy News Radio and Fallout 4's Diamond City Radio, especially Roy Brown. If you don't recall Mighty Mighty Man...
Well, I'm a mighty, mighty man, I'm young and I'm in my prime. Yes, I'm a mighty, mighty man, I'm young and I'm in my prime.
Then maybe you remember Good Rockin' Tonight.
Well, I heard the news, there's good rockin' tonight. Well, I'm gonna hold my baby tight as I can. Tonight she'll know I'm a mighty, mighty man. I heard the news, there's good rockin' tonight.
And then everyone's favorite, Butcher Pete Part 1 and Part 2.
Hey, everybody, did the news get around about a guy named Butcher Pete? Old Pete just flew into this town and he's chopping up all the women's meat.
This episode's biography comes from rockabillyeurope.com. Roy James Brown was born on September 10, 1920, in New Orleans, Louisiana. Brown formed his own gospel quartet, the Rookie Four, and frequently sang in the local church before moving to California in 1942. After 2 years as a professional boxer, he began entering and winning amateur talent contests with his renditions of the pop songs of his idol, Bing Crosby. He returned to Louisiana in 1925 and formed his first jump band, the Melodiers, for a long-term residency at the Club Granada in Galveston, Texas. There he worked with Clarence Samuels as a double act, the Blues Twins, and was illicitly recorded by the Gold Star label. By this time, Brown had eschewed Tin Pan Alley Pop for Jump Blues and was singing in a highly original style for the time, utilizing his gospel background and his extremely soulful voice. Returning to New Orleans penniless in 1947, Brown tried in vain to sell a song he had written to the greatest blues shouter Wynonie Harris. When Harris turned the song down, Brown sang the number with Harris's band and, legend has it, tore up the house. The song Good Rockin' Tonight was soon recorded by Brown for Deluxe and sold so well throughout the South that, ironically, Wynonie Harris covered it for King Records a year later. Both versions have regularly been credited with inventing rock and roll and having a seminal influence on the young Elvis Presley. A popular phrase from the song persuaded Brown to rename his combo the Mighty Mighty Men, and he recorded extensively for Deluxe and later King Records between 1947 and 1955. During which time he had further success with songs like Boogie at Midnight, Hard Luck Blues, Love Don't Love Nobody, Long About Sundown, and Trouble at Midnight. During this phase of his career, the gospel soul singer wailed about earthly secular subjects, some of them too ribald to be released for 30 years or more, and inspired devotees including B.B. King, Bobby Bland, and Jackie Wilson, Little Richard, and James Brown. In 1956, Dave Bartholomew signed Brown to Imperial Records, where he spent his time split successfully between making mediocre Fats Domino-styled records and covering pop rockabilly hits. He moved further towards pop during 1959 at King Records. In the soul era, Brown made a handful of good Willie Mitchell-arranged singles in Memphis for Home of the Blues. A decade of label hopping followed, with Brown frequently working with Johnny Otis's band until 1977, when a great deal of interest was generated with the release of Laughing But Crying, a collection of vintage tracks issued by John Bernholm's Route 66 label. The following year, Brown toured Europe to packed houses and rave reviews, and returned to the USA to a similar reception. A string of successful nationwide appearances culminated in Brown's storming return to the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival in April 1981. He died peacefully the following month. Now we move on to Mr. Wynonie Harris. Wynonie is actually a new addition to the post-apocalyptic Bethesda series. He's only known for the memorable tune, Grandma Plays the Numbers, from Fallout 4 so far.
Say, Wynonie, I was by your house last night, and guess what happened? What happened, Mom? Your grandma was playing the number.
But chances are, if you heard it, you already know how flamboyant his style is, and his story, though short, is interesting, to say the least. Black music has known a vast number of larger-than-life characters. Few came larger than Wynonie Harris. The loud-talking, fast-living, womanizing, hard-drinking, and witty son of a gun. but he was a true original and arguably the greatest of the blues shouters. From 1948 until 1952, he was one of the biggest selling recording artists in the jukebox, dominated by rhythm and blues. Wynonie Harris was born in Omaha, Nebraska, to an unwed 15-year-old mother and an American Indian father that he saw only once in his life. Despite accounts that Harris spent 2 years in Creighton University as a pre-med student, Harris was actually a high school dropout who broke into showbiz as a dancer and a club MC. He sang in Omaha nightclubs and was a bit of a local celebrity. But it wasn't until he moved to Los Angeles in 1940 that his musical career began to gain some momentum. After his discovery in 1944, Harris joined the Lucky Millinder Orchestra, a blues shouter in the Kansas City style of Joe Turner and Jimmy Rushing. Wynonie sang on Millender's Decca hits Hurry Hurry and Who Threw the Whiskey in the Well, #1 R&B, and #7 pop in mid-1945. The latter song was released almost a year after it was recorded. By the time it charted, Harris had left Millender and embarked upon a solo career. The first record under his own name, Wynonie Mr. Blues Harris, was the two-part single Around the Clock, recorded in July 1945 with the Johnny Otis Band. It would provide the inspiration for Chuck Berry's R&R classic Reelin' and Rockin' 1958. Later in 1945, he cut 6 singles for Apollo, with chart success for Wynonie's Blues, #3, and Playful Baby, #2, in 1946. Subsequent recordings for Hamptone, Bullet, and Aladdin failed to sell through, and when Harris signed with King Records in late 1947, he was desperate for a hit. It would turn out to be the beginning of a very lucrative decade for both parties. 4 sessions were held in December 1947, anticipating a recording ban by the American Federation of Musicians that took effect on January 1st, 1948. The second King single to be released was Good Rockin' Tonight, written and originally recorded by fellow blues shouter Roy Brown. Harris's version rocked much harder and shot to the top of the R&B charts in June 1948. It started a trend of records concerned with rockin', not only by Harris himself, but many other artists. Also influential was Wynonie's Hoy 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 call, which was copied on several other records to generate excitement. Elvis Presley would record Good Rockin' Tonight and his second Son single in 1954, starting off with the question, "Have you heard the news?" whereas Brown and Harris emphasized that they had heard the news. Many others have recorded the song over the years. After Good Rockin' Tonight, Harris was rarely absent from the R&B charts for the next 4 years. His 13 top 10 hits on King include All She Wants to Do Is Rock, #1 in 1949, Sittin' on It All the Time, #3 in 1950, I Like My Baby's Puddin', #5 in 1950, and Lovin' Machine, #5 in 1952, his last chart entry. Those titles indicate Harris's penchant for double entendre songs, often of a ribald nature. Harris also covered several country hits, usually by fellow King artists. He had big hits with Good Morning Judge, originally done by Louis Innes, Bloodshot Eyes, Hank Penny, and I Feel That Old Age Comin' On, Homer and Jethro, as well as more moderate success with Adam Come and Get Your Rib, Wayne Rainey, and Triflin' Woman, Moon McCullen. Though the quality of his recordings was undiminished, Harris's star dimmed significantly with the advent of rock and roll. He helped to create the new music, but, try as he might, Wynonie could not sustain a career in rock and roll. At 40, he was just too old to be a rock and roll star. Teenage audiences saw him as a dirty old man singing dirty old songs about sex and alcohol. But as late as October '54, Harris still had the arrogance to claim, "I'm the highest paid blues singer in the business. I'm a 1,500 a week man. I started the present vogue of rocking blues tunes," in an interview with Tan magazine. After one Atco single in 1956, he briefly returned to King in 1957. In the 1960s, he recorded for Roulette and Chess with no success. He was a sick man by then, but he kept on drinking and carrying on. His last known appearance was at the Apollo Theater in Harlem in 1967, where he stunned the audience with his power-packed performance. On June 14, 1969, Wynonie Harris died of esophageal cancer at the USC Medical Center in Los Angeles. He was only 53. And that, dear listener, is the story of Roy Brown and Wynonie Harris. As I said before, I personally think these two artists, with the unique style of music they made, are sadly underrated. In fact, if it wasn't for Fallout doing the job of reintroducing them, they probably would have only further been lost to the rest of us. And I think the best thing that could be done now is to add even more of their music to this great franchise. And before I go, if you want to hear more of these mighty men, and others like them, don't hesitate to download my totally free A-Bomb Radio app for all major smartphone platforms, or search it on TuneInRadio.com. Until next time, I'm Atomic Wolf, and I'll see you in the next one.